Tony D and Little Joan somewhere in the background, and this is a screenwriter's take on Pearl, installment 2 of the Ty West trilogy. And let me tell you something, out of the 3, I think this is my favorite one. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. The links are in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys. Books 1 through 16, available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. So, as you know, I saw the first movie, which is X, and then the third movie, which is Maxine. The middle movie is a prequel to the first movie. And you're going to think I'm nuts, but I actually enjoyed this prequel. I know. You've heard me time and time again say, prequels, prequels suck. And most times, they do. I gotta say, with Pearl, I actually enjoyed this one. I actually enjoyed it. So, we're gonna analyze, I'm gonna give you some of the non-spoiler review, and then we'll get into the spoilers and some of the themes here that Ty West delves into with Mia Goth. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. All right. So, this is the second movie. So, typically you would have already seen the first movie, X. And what happens in X, just to briefly recap, spoilers for X, if you haven't seen that review. Mia Goth plays a woman in 1979, and her and her crew come to a farm in Texas where they shoot a porno. But it turns out the old farm couple, Pearl and her husband, are kind of murderous. They're kind of murderous, especially Pearl. She's a complete and utter psycho. She's also very old, so the murders in the first movie have to be dealt in such a way that only an old person could get away with it, kind of thing, because all the victims are young. So this movie flashes back to 1918 when Pearl was young and beautiful. And it shows you just how psychopathic she is. You know, it starts out relatively calm. She's got this strict German mother. Her father's in a wheelchair. She has to take care of him. But really, one of the key characters is Howard. And Howard is already Pearl's husband. And we find out more about Howard than anybody other than Pearl in this movie. And that is sort of the background of why Howard is the way he is in the first movie. And you see a decent amount of Howard in the first movie. In this movie, not so much. It really focuses on Pearl and what she's going through when Howard's away at the war. So, it's a very different movie. It's really the origin of Pearl and why she is the way she is. And it's interesting to explore this character because we already see her fate, but the reasons why Pearl does what she does in the first movie, only some of them are revealed. This movie really fleshes out the backstory in such a way that the details are very interesting. There's also some thematic stuff, and some of the lines from the first movie that Pearl said are also in this movie, which would make sense. She's the same character, but to hear them again in a different context, you know, shows you the backstory of that, shows you why she said these things. So I was very surprised how much I enjoyed this and the themes throughout. Now, I'd already seen the third movie, and that's about Maxine. Eventually, she's the only survivor in the first movie, right? So she gets to Hollywood, and then it's about some stuff that happens to her. I won't get too deep into that spoiler, but because maybe you haven't seen that one. I assume you've already seen X, but she, you know, basically the events of the first movie weigh heavily on her in that movie. So we're done with Pearl by the time we get to the third movie, although you see a couple of glimpses of her. So I if you are a fan of these Ty West movies, if you've seen the first one and you enjoyed it, now I thought the first one's a little gory for my taste, but again, very surprising, very straightforward, meat and potatoes, very deliberate in the plotting. Just every detail moves the story forward, tells us more about Pearl, tells us more about her situation, and the real thing that amazed me is how much tension there was, because you already know Pearl's a complete and utter psycho from the first movie. In this movie, it hasn't happened yet, but you know it's gonna happen. So you're waiting for her to snap. You're waiting for her to murder people and find out why she does it. And the build is really well done. Just as an aside, David Cornsweet's in it, the new Superman, and he plays a very interesting character. And again, just like in the other two Ty West movies, each character has a background, a personality, and the detail is just great. The detail is just great. Okay, let me get into the spoilers of this movie, because I really want to talk about the themes. I mean, this is what you get when you write a really tight screenplay and a tight universe. He has a very tight universe here. So in 1918, Pearl is living on her family's farm. As I said, it's the mother and father. The father's wheelchair bound. He can't even talk. He can barely move. The mother is a strict German, like super strict. She won't let Pearl do anything. Pearl spends 8 cents at the movies. Again, 1918. And her mother figures it out. Refuses to. She lies and says she had some candy on the way home from getting her father's medicine, which she also drank, in order to make sure he ran out sooner so she could then go back to town to go to the movies, because she lives in a fantasy world in which she's going to be a star. And that's the theme in the first and third movies as well. Maxine wants to be a star. She's ruthless about being a star. So that theme carries into this movie. Even though Maxine isn't a psychopath, although Maxine does some stuff, Pearl clearly is. She's sick. And even her mother sees it, right? Her mother sees it early on, and but slowly, as things get worse and worse for Pearl, as she starts to become unglued, and we see her cruelty, right? We see her petty cruelty to the animals on the farm. So she takes a pitchfork and kills Mr. Goose, and then feeds his body to Theta, or Theta. Theta is the name of the alligator. The alligator's in the first movie, right? I don't know if it's the same alligator, because they show that it had laid some eggs, so it could be a different one. But it's very interesting to me that she names the alligator Theta after Theta Barra, because there's a scene where she goes into town, and in the movies, this is 1918, so this would be the silent movie era. The movie that's playing is Cleopatra, starring Theta Barra. So she named the alligator Theta Barra. And then in the third movie, there's an allusion to this, because there's a scene in which Maxine is smoking a cigarette in 1985, and she drops it and puts it out on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and the star she puts it out on is Theta Barra. So I love that. I love that thematic consistency throughout the series. Another great moment is later in the movie when Pearl goes for her audition. They tell her to stand on an X, and it's the X, which is the name of the first movie. Maxine, XXX, also X. They all, even the auditioner says, we're looking for that X factor, which is an old term, I guess. So X is thematically through all 3 movies. And so she goes to town. This is in, first act, they set up her on the farm. Her life is miserable from her perspective, but she's a total psycho. And every time she goes to town to buy her dad medicine, she sneaks into the movies, or, spends money on the movies, and she shouldn't do it. She meets the projectionist, played by David Cornsweet, James Gunn's Superman. He clearly wants to get with her, but he has no idea what a psychopath she is. So he's very nice to her, and he tells her that she can see a movie anytime she wants. And at first she just says, "No, I'm married. I can't see you," or whatever, or you get that vibe, and she leaves. But later, when her mother is just so out of control, she goes to see him, and that's when she has sex with him. And no, wait, actually, the first time she goes to see him, he shows her a stag film from 1918, and that's thematic in X and Maxine, because Maxine is a porn star. They're making a porn in the first one, and in the third one, she's trying to get out of porn, but she's still in the game. So that was very interesting to me. All right. So after we establish she's on the farm and she meets the projectionist, she comes back. Her mother's still a miserable person, but generally she's trying to keep Pearl straight. But more and more, each time they argue, she kind of kicks it up like, you can't do this. You have to, stay on the farm. Because they know she's sick. They know she's sick in the head, right? So, her sister-in-law, Howard's sister, is well off. Her family comes to the farm and delivers them a roasted pig. And while she's there, the sister-in-law talks to Pearl, says there's this dance audition, and this is where the audition comes in. So, she's going. She wants Pearl to go. So Pearl agrees to go, but how's she going to get, her mother doesn't want her to do that kind of stuff, wants her to stay on the farm. Pearl wants to leave the farm, doesn't want anything to do with the farm. So this is the second act. The second act is Pearl getting ready for the audition. At some point, she sneaks off the farm, borrows her mother's dresses because she has no dresses of her own, and then goes to see the projectionist in a dress. That time they don't have sex. The first time they don't have sex, but he shows her the stag movie. Then it goes back. She's still trying to, and at one point, I think she says to the projectionist, "I wish, my mother and father would just die." And we know that's going to happen because she already killed the goose. At some point, she steals an egg from the alligator's nest. And that nest is also from the first movie. Like everything on the farm we've seen in the first movie, except by then it's old and decrepit, right? We've seen the dock where the alligator is. Oh. And the most amazing part about it, and I picked up on this very early, was when in the first movie, Pearl says to her husband, "I don't like blondes." Apropos of nothing. And she pushed the blonde porn star into the lake to be eaten by the alligator. And she says, "I don't like blondes," which kind of works for the movie on its own. But then when you see this movie and you see Mitzi as a blonde, almost immediately I was like, oh my God, she's going to kill her. Because she's jealous of her and she's a total psychopath. So then the mother and the father continue to be a burden from her point of view. And the mother finally finds a playbill when Pearl went to go see the movie. And so she confronts her about it. They get into a big argument. Pearl tells her that, she wants to get off the farm. She wants to go to this audition. The mother won't let her go. Eventually, she insults the mother so badly, she slaps her. They get into a physical fight, start slapping back and forth. And during the struggle, She pushes her mom up against the fireplace. Her dress goes in. She catches on fire. She's burning up. And then Pearl goes to put out the fire by picking up a boiling pot of, I think they were boiling corn and potatoes, just dumps it on her, puts out the fire, but scalds her even further, burns her even further. And then throws her down the basement steps. And we've seen the basement in the previous movie. That's where, in the previous movie, they had the dead hippie chained up. What the hell they were doing it with him in that movie, you can only imagine. So, the father, of course, is completely paralyzed just about, and he can only watch this. And the whole time he's watching it, and it's bad. So Pearl puts on a dress, and oh no, she doesn't put on a dress then. It's pouring rain. She goes to see the projectionist, knocks on the door. He answers. She just kisses him, and they go inside and have sex. The next morning, he offers to take her to drive her back to the farm, and he thinks, because he says he's a bohemian, that it's all cool. He doesn't realize how sick Pearl is, and that's also thematic from the first movie, right? Everybody who tries to be nice to Pearl ends up killing, because they just don't understand what they're dealing with. They're around her. Once they're around her long enough, they begin to realize, oh my God, she is out of her mind. So David Cornsweet delivers her back to the farm. She introduces him to her father, who she cleans up a little, but obviously he wants to tell him, but he can't. And then Cornsweet starts to get suspicious. She takes him upstairs to the bedroom to have sex. Now she makes that suggestion right in front of the father, and he goes up there anyway. So as they're screwing around, he keeps hearing thudding. So he insists, like, what is that? What is that? And Pearl's just like, ignore it, and then ignore it. So eventually he says, I can't ignore it. So he goes down there, and he ends up not opening the door, but, he ends up going into the farm, or the barn, and Pearl is showing him the animals. And she shows him all the animals, and while she leads him to the farm, or the barn, she just says, the problem is my dog made a mess in the kitchen, and I locked him in the root cellar. But then she names all the animals in the barn, but fails to mention the dog. And then when Cornsweet asks her about it, she says, we don't have a dog. And then he goes, but you told me you locked the dog in the root cellar. And then she has no answer for him, and that's really great to see, because you just see her go like, I can't lie my way out of this. What am I going to do? And so Cornsweet then tries to leave, and that's when Pearl goes complete and utter psycho. She starts screaming at him, why? Why are you leaving? What changed? What changed? And he tries to say, no, it's fine. I just got to get back to the theater. And he gets into his car, starts it up, but before he can drive away, Pearl strikes and stabs him through the heart with the pitchfork. And it's friggin' mental. Kills him, that later pushes his body in the same body of water that in the first movie, that's where they pushed the car that belonged to the hippie who was dead in their basement, right? So all these great little callbacks, and yet this is a prequel. So that's what I love about it. She's basically killed her parents, or injured them so horribly that they're not going to be able to do anything. And then she finally goes on the audition, right? There's no one's around to stop her. Goes on the audition with Mitzi, has this big audition. They tell her no. They're looking for a girl that's younger and more blonde. Mitzi goes, and then after the audition, she drives, goes with her back to the farm. I'm not sure how they get there. I think they get there on the bike. Yeah, I think they get there on the bike. Anyhow, Mitzi makes the huge mistake in the climactic. This is the third act now. The audition, I think, is the third act. And then she makes the mistake of, bringing Pearl out and saying, Pearl says stuff like, I don't think I'm like other people. I think there's something really wrong with me. And it is. She's a psychopath. She can't feel empathy for, living things. And we hear some of that in the monologue that the mother has before she burns up. And now Mitzi keeps pushing her. Okay, pretend I'm Howard and say what you need to say to me. So as she cries, Pearl confesses her terrible murderous thoughts, essentially, which is such a great scene because about halfway through, Mitzi realizes, kind of senses what is happening and tells her, you know what, you don't have to keep going. And she just keeps going. And then Mitzi makes the move where she says, well, I have to go now. And as she's trying to leave, Pearl says, you don't have to lie to me. I know you got the audition. And she apparently did. And first she denies it, and then she says, yeah, I got it. And maybe you can come see the show or whatever. But then she says, you're not going to tell anybody, right? And she's like, no, I won't. And she goes to leave, and what a great climactic scene. You see Mitzi coming out of the farmhouse, and she's walking away, and then Pearl comes out behind her like a minute later, picks up the axe, and then just starts running after her. I mean, what a great shot. Excuse me. And then Pearl horribly murders her. Butchers her body, feeds her to Theta, and then part of her confession in that really cool monologue is that Pearl is basically just going to wait for Howard to come home and be the wife he's always wanted. And maybe she could somehow be happy. And so we get why Pearl stayed on the farm with Howard, gave up her dream because she really did love him in her own weird way. And we get why Howard in the first movie is protective of her, knows that she is sick. He must know that she killed her parents and helped her cover it up. And they stay on the farm, and that's why the first movie happens. So, amazing. I really like the way it all tied in. And again, this was shocking to me. There's Mitzi, because I've preached many. There's the X on the floor to tie in with X. There he is. This is David Cornsweat showing her the stag film. There's the stag film. And many fantasies of her being a star. Another theme that's in the Maxine movies. You're a star, I'm going to be a star. Really works out great. Now, why does this prequel work? And 99% of the prequels I see don't work. Well, for me, the first movie, which is X, you don't learn that much about Pearl. And the Pearl you see in that movie stands on her own, right? So if they never made this second movie, which is a sequel, although it's a sequel and a prequel, that movie X would have stood on its own. You know, it would have been the old lady was a psychopath who wanted to have sex again, and she couldn't have sex with her husband because he was too old and he was worried about his heart, and you know, that sort of what drove her, but mostly she was just sick, because that's what Howard says, my wife is sick, you know, don't bother my wife. It's like Howard's trying to warn them not to get near Pearl, but they kind of don't listen, and Pearl kind of is, you know, a force to be reckoned with. So you see it in a different context. You see Pearl, how she became a psychopath, why she stayed on the farm with Howard all that time, and you know, that they probably Pearl has been killing people, and Howard loves her so much. And that's really what you learn every time Pearl starts talking about Howard throughout this movie. That Howard loved Pearl so much. He had a comfortable life in a rich family. He gave it up for her to live on a farm, to work hard. He didn't care. He just loves her so much. And he loves her so much that when Pearl pretends to confess to Howard, but it's really confessing to Mitzi, you get the impression that she actually did that confession to Howard in some form after he comes back from the war. We don't get to see it, but after he comes back from the war, she's probably forced to confess at some point, like, yeah, I killed my parents and Mitzi and everybody. but he still loves her so much. He helps her cover up the terrible murders. And Pearl also admits how good the murders made her feel, which is probably the reason she kills the hippie, just because he was there and she had a chance to kill another person and it made her feel good. But she won't kill Howard, and maybe it's part of her sexual frustration. That's why she started killing again. Maybe she didn't kill for like 50 years and then Howard stops having sex with her and now she's killing. Something like that. She also confesses she cheated on him. So that was interesting. Yeah. So I was kind of blown away how much I like this movie. And I also don't like slasher movies. But they shoot this kind of like one of the old style 40s or 50s Technicolor movies, with the orchestra music and characters from a simpler era. It was really interesting to me, and that is I am impressed how much I like this movie, considering a lot of prequels, they don't really show you much. And this really shows you why Pearl is on that farm in the first movie. And we don't get to really... I mean, she's a creepy old woman when the X movie starts, right? She's constantly getting undressed and sleeping with people, trying to like have sex with people because Howard won't have sex with her anymore. So... And Maxine, of course, wants nothing to do with her. She climbs into Maxine's bed in one scene in the first movie. So this movie, oh man, when she makes the comment about the blonde in the first movie, and then I see Mitzi, and I'm like, oh man, she's gonna kill Mitzi. And then you know why she hates blondes. In the first movie, that's just a throwaway line, but by this movie, you hear why. Great planning. This is a guy who is planning out his universe, right? He's got it all mapped out. And he's making references to each movie and each time period. The themes are there. This is how you write movies, especially a franchise. How could you not like that? And I still like the Maxine character. I would love to see some sort of sequel where Maxine, in the modern day, is old. Oh, I lost the Jones side. And then there's another young Mia Goth character of some kind. I don't know. I'd love to see a fourth movie, quite frankly. This is an interesting franchise, especially if you love horror. I gotta say, it's not so much the horror elements that I like about this. I like the interesting interplay with the characters. And every character had a real personality. It continues the theme of exactly what happened in the first movie. Every character that's nice to Pearl doesn't realize what they're getting into, and by the time they do, she kills them. Same thing with Howard in one scene too, but especially with the Pearl character. So, yeah, Pearl is very interesting. Yeah, this is the confession scene. Oh, and I got to tell you, the one thing I love is the ending, right? So the ending, what a scene. Now, normally in slasher movies, what happens? Well, the slasher gets killed. It's pretty standard. Or he's sort of killed. Maybe he's dead. Maybe he's not. Or he goes to jail, maybe. In this movie, we already know Pearl not only survives, but is never caught for the murders. Otherwise, she'd be in jail for and she would have been executed back in 1918. But in this movie, we know she gets away scot-free. So when they have the final scene, this horrifying scene, where Pearl tries to make a perfect home, but she's such a psychopath, instead of getting rid of the bodies of her mother and father, she dresses them up, puts them at the dinner table, dresses up herself, takes the pig that Mitzi's family left for them, which for some reason they didn't eat. They just left on the front porch and never brought it inside and just let it rot. I guess there was maybe a missing scene or a line that I missed about the mother refusing the food because she's too proud, maybe. I don't know. I don't know why she wouldn't have eaten that pig, but, you know, they never bring the pig inside. It's just covered in maggots. So she brings that inside too. And it's like maggots and dead people. And Howard finally comes home to the war and sees this. And it's all horrifying. And he turns to Pearl, and she's just smiling with this strained smile on her face. And then the credits roll over it, and it goes on. It's a live shot, but it goes on forever. It's an agonizing sort of shot of Pearl just forcing the smile on her face, and you know she's forcing it, and she's crying, and then eventually she starts crying. I mean, that's an ending to me. It's different. It fits with the character, fits with the themes. It's all a theme about wanting to be a star, and doing anything. So it's got these themes about narcissism. Oh man, yeah, I definitely like this one the best. I think I like this one the best. Maxine, the third movie, second, and I'd rank. I mean, X is okay. I think this movie actually makes X better. The origin, now that I know the origin, it makes that first movie better, because now I know he planned this entire thing. And maybe he wrote all three movies right in a row. He probably wrote the first two movies in a row, or maybe he intended to shoot this first and X second. He could have run them that way. That would have been different too. It would have been different if you saw them in that order. If you saw them in the order Pearl, X, and Maxine, which would be chronological, I wonder what my reaction would have been. But this ending, very different. I like endings like this. If you're going to make a horror movie, please make an ending like this. Everybody dies and the killer gets away. I know. You know, horror movies are not about justice. Those are like cop movies. Like cop movies, you don't want to see an ending like this. But a horror movie, oh, you absolutely 100% want an ending like this, where the craziest psychopathic woman you've ever seen on screen gets away scot-free. She's still as crazy as a bedbug, and yet Howard loves her so much, he spends the rest of his life on the farm with her, covering up all her crazy crimes. And that's the other thing. When she kills the projectionist and dumps his body in the car in the river, and then you see the alligator coming up, it's like, oh my God, that's the same as in X, where you see the hippies, VW, already in the water. And then later they find him in the basement. I don't know why they bothered to take him out of there. Or, you know, to put him in the basement. But good job. Good job. So this is how you write a screenplay. I mean, I think this is a good screenplay. I really do. This would be, if you want to write a franchise, and you probably shouldn't, but if you want to write one, this is how you do it. You should really look at these screenplays, I think. Look at the characterization. Look at what he's doing. He's setting things up very steadily. He's not trying to be too clever. He's showing you everything about Pearl. He's showing you the details. You know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. Even in the first movie, you know what's going to happen. So there's no sense in being clever, like, oh, we don't know who the killer is. Or maybe it's Mitzi. No. Stop doing all that. Stop doing all that clever stuff. You're not clever. This is clever. Giving us what we want. Showing a increasing heightening of Pearl's psychosis. That's what we want to see. We want to see heightening. Anyhow, that's it for me, Tony D. and Little Joan. I'm so happy I saw this movie. It's very rare I find a good movie. And, yeah. Bravo, Ty West. Bravo. Best one of the three. All right. I am done for a little while, thank God. As you know, I've been on a nonstop tour of South Jersey Sadly, I had to cancel my Halloween event because of my foot. My foot is a lot better, thank you. But tonight was a wonderful event at Busby's Eatery and General Store in Chatsworth, New Jersey. And that went off great. We had a great night. We had a great pasta dinner. And I told all my stories, and everybody loved it. And I sold a bunch of books. So we're definitely going to do that again. I'm not sure when, but you'll be the first to know. I don't know if we'll even have time before the end of the year to do it again. I mean, I think we have it, but it's hard to get people to come out. Like, once it hits the holidays, the Halloweeny stuff kind of goes away. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe we'll squeeze one in before Thanksgiving or something like that. There's a lot of month left. Maybe early December. I don't know. I'll let you know. But the next thing for me won't be until November 9th. I'll be back at the 13th Child Brewery from 11 to 2. There's going to be a harvest market there. And I got about 6 or 7 things coming up this month. December looks a little light, and I gotta get back on the phone this week. But I'm gonna take it easy, rest my foot, take care of some stuff in the house I've been letting go. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you.